Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about bonding with your foster baby. I know a lot of you are expecting to have young babies and children in your home, and you might be wondering how those first few days are going to go, how you're going to be bonding and attaching with them. And as someone who has experience with this, I got my son at 5 months old. I thought it would be helpful to kind of share my tips and tricks on how to bond and attach quickly with you and your child. Now before I get into that, if you're new here, my name is Autumn Renee. I am a 23-year-old foster parent. I did start this process out as a single foster parent. If you're interested in my journey, you can check out my channel below. My son is about to be 2 now, and we are adopting him this summer, so it's very exciting. I can't wait to continue to share this journey with you guys. I started this channel to help make resources for other foster and adoptive parents, and I hope to continue to do that vision. We definitely plan to continue in foster and adopt in the future, so definitely stay tuned for the rest of our journey. Okay, so for today's video, as I said, I want to talk about bonding with your foster baby. And this is important for a couple different reasons. Most importantly, it minimizes the trauma that the baby feels. Once they can realize that you're a safe and secure place, then they will know, like, I'm okay here. That'll kind of minimize that trauma that they're going to feel from being kind of ripped from their normal environment. And they are going to have trauma regardless of where they came from, because they are coming and you have most likely have no knowledge of their sleep schedule, their feeding schedule, what they've been exposed to, and it's going to be a whole different place for them. So they are going to have some trauma, and bonding with them is going to help minimize the amount of trauma that they feel. The other thing that is so important for babies is that secure attachment and physical touch and all of that is so important for babies' brain development and just their emotional development and everything else. There's so many studies that show that that bond and that connection help foster so many neurons in the brain that will really only foster at that point in life, and if they don't, then they lose it for the rest of their lives. So it's very, very important. I also want to touch on a little bit that you're not going to know everything about these babies when they get you. My son was an emergency placement. I knew very, very little about him before he was placed in my home, and I did not know how severely he'd been neglected, if he'd been exposed to abuse, what drugs he might have been exposed to, what he was used to feeding when he was used to sleeping. I mean, I just knew very, very little about him. He was basically a stranger. And, just be prepared for that you're not going to be armed with very much information, which makes this bonding process all that more important. So just be prepared for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into my tips and tricks for bonding with your baby. So the first and most important thing, and I think I'd like to preface this with saying, it is so, so important to come into fostering and adopting with an open mind. Now, we all have kind of our preconceived notions about what parenting should look like. Maybe it's how our parents parented us. Maybe it's the opposite of how our parents parented us. Maybe you've raised another child before, or you've nannied or been around children, and maybe you kind of have an idea of how you want to parent. And that's great. It's great to be armed with those tools. But it's also so important that you go into this with an open mind, because every child is going to be so different, especially a child who has been exposed to things like trauma, abuse, neglect, and drug exposure. All of those things are going to play into this about how and what parenting styles are going to work. So I know some parenting styles do kind of encourage things like crying it out, maybe not responding to needs immediately, maybe like leaving your kid in a playpen for a certain amount of time. And I'm not saying that any of those things are necessarily wrong. And I'm not even saying that you inherently can't use that with any foster or adoptive child. I'm definitely not saying that. But I do think when you first get your baby, it is so important that you respond to their needs quickly and immediately. And the reason for this is because that baby does not know you. That baby does not know that you're a safe person. That baby doesn't know that you're going to respond to them. So they don't know if they're going to get food from you. They don't know if they're going to be changing their dirty diaper, or if you're going to be putting them down to sleep. Like they don't know these things, and it takes a while for them to build up that trust. So it is very important when you first get your baby that you're making sure that you're responding to their needs. So if they're crying, you're being responsive and soothing. If they seem hungry, you're going to feed them. If they seem sleepy, you're going to help them sleep. And it can be really tempting to just want to move them on a strict schedule or implement all these parenting policies that you may be used to. But like I said, when those first few weeks and maybe first few months, it really just depends on the child. You need to be so responsive to their needs, because they need to learn that you're the safe place, that you're going to feed them when they're hungry, that you're going to soothe them when they're sad, that you're going to not let them sit in a soiled diaper, because that might be the life that they're used to, and you need to show them that there are people who are going to care for them alive and are going to love on them and are going to be a safe place. So you need to work on building that trust early. I'm not saying that any of those other parenting methods are wrong or bad. I'm just saying, like, at the beginning, you absolutely need to respond to their needs quickly and build that trusting bond. So that's kind of my first tip, is that quick response. And kind of going along with that, I would shy away from any kind of isolation situations. If your baby is calm and happy, it's fine and totally fine to put them in a playpen or something like that for a decent amount of time, and supervising, of course, all of that. But if they're screaming bloody murder because you put them in a playpen, with a regular, quote-unquote, biological child, that may be okay because they still know that you love them and that you're safe. But that baby, they might, register that being in a playpen means that you're going to leave for 15 hours and not feed them, because maybe that's what they're used to. And you don't know these things going in. You don't know what what they remember or what they're associating things with. So if they're screaming bloody murder when you put them in a swing or, a playpen or whatever, and, just use your best judgment, because they really might be associating that with horrible, trauma or neglect. And you just don't know. And I'm speaking from experience here. My son, when I put him in a playpen when he was younger, just completely lost it. I mean, he hated it. And I was trying very hard to kind of use some baby-wise principles, which kind of included like rotating stations and stuff. And I was going to use a playpen as like part of the play area. And I would be there with him and try to play with him. And he would scream. And like, I don't know for a fact if that was linked to trauma or not. But I wasn't willing to risk that, and I wasn't, I didn't know what he was associating with that, and I just didn't feel good about it, so I didn't. I just nixed that and decided we're not going to use a playpen in the house, and that's okay. And I really want you to go into an open mind and knowing that your kids may have been exposed to things that make some traditional parenting ideas a little bit harder to implement. So just kind of know that going in, that you might need to adjust maybe your idea or some of the things you might be doing with your baby or child. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is physical touch. And as I already said, this is so important for their brain development and their emotional development, and really just that attachment. Babies and caregivers, so much of that bonding is just physical, like being around them. They get to know your scent, you get to know theirs, the feel of you, the feel of them, and it's just so important. And so there's a couple different ways you can help foster this. One of the most obvious ways is baby wearing. So carrying the baby in a baby carrier or a sling or a wrap, depending on the age of the baby, can be a great way, especially if you're really busy and you have other children and you need to clean the house. That could be a great way to still have that physical touch and bonding, but still kind of have your hands free. So baby wearing is a great thing, not a must. There's definitely other ways to have physical touch, but that's just something that I found was super helpful and my son loved. He was so calm in the baby carrier. We'd go on walks in it. I'd carry him around the house occasionally in it. It wasn't that he was in there all the time, but it was just a great occasional thing to have. The next thing is this is pretty obvious, but just cuddling and rocking and swinging, just anything where you're interacting with them in a physical, soothing way. I was very conscious about doing this, especially if you're a working parent. Anytime he got home from daycare, we would just sit and have this little, one-on-one, let's cuddle and talk about your day, and just kind of having that, once again, building that trust, building that, hey, I still care about you, I love you, how was your day, like just building that love. And that might seem silly for such a young baby, but those babies are sentient beings and they understand, and they're capable of building those bonds and recognizing people, and they're just little people who are still growing. So it's very important that you encourage that physical touch and physical bonding as much as possible. And that rocking and swaying kinds of motions are also so important too for bonding and trauma. There's actually even been studies to show that older children who've experienced trauma benefit from rocking and swaying. So that just goes to show you how important it can be. So those might seem kind of obvious, but just once again, being intentional about doing it as much as possible, especially in terms of like if they just woke up or just got back from daycare where there's been kind of a period of time where we haven't seen each other, making that time to have that connection. It can be so tempting to just get dinner started and unpack everything, but just take those few minutes or however long to just be there with the baby. And that's just kind of, I don't know, my experience and my advice as kind of working single parent. Another thing that I think is really important in addition to physical touch is verbal communication. Singing to your baby, talking to your baby, saying soothing sounds to your baby. I mean, all of these things are so important, not just for their auditory development and their vocabulary development, but just once again, that bonding. You're showing them that you want to communicate with them, that you are interested in forming that connection with them. And as your baby grows, they will start cooing and mimicking and stuff back. And a really great way to implement this is just to kind of prop them up on your knees when you're sitting and just make that eye contact and just really focus in. You're not looking at your phone, you're not looking at a book, you're just really focusing on them and talking to them about their day and their thoughts, and pausing for them to kind of give a response back to you, whether it's a little baby coo or a giggle or whatever. You know, it can be really important to show them like, hey, I care about what you're trying to say, because babies are trying to communicate. Another way you can foster communication is using baby signs. This can be a great way to start getting that communication and meeting their needs. You can teach babies as young as 6 months old very simple signs like more, or please. There's just very, very simple ones. I did not do a ton of baby signing, but we did do some very basic ones. You know, my son learned more very easily because he learned that more meant he got more food. And it was great for me because I knew he could tell me if he wanted more, if he was still hungry. The next thing I want to talk about is laughter. And I feel like laughing is such an important thing for bonding. Like, just think about all those like memories with your friends or family who just like made you like belly laugh. Like, it creates such good memories and such good feelings in the brain. And I really do think that's important for babies too. So even if you're playing with them with like a puppet or bubbles or making funny voices at them, I definitely think creating those memories and that laughter definitely has a lasting impact on bonding as well. And the last thing I want to talk about is just food. And obviously this seems pretty obvious, but just when you're feeding your baby, try to make it a very personal experience. So, you know, if you're spoon feeding, making the eye contact, talking to them about the food, and handing it to them. If you're bottle feeding, once again, rocking, cuddling, don't just hand in a bottle. Make it a, personal, loving, caring experience as much as possible. And you can really do that with anything. You know, when you're changing their clothes, you can talk about their clothes and you can be like, oh, it's soft, feel how soft it is. And when you're doing their diaper change, you can sing them a soothing song, give them a little baby massage. There's just, there's so many ways, little ways that you can bond with your baby through everyday tasks that don't really take that much extra time, that I feel like really pay off in the end. Now, obviously there are so many other ways you can bond with your child. I couldn't possibly cover them all in this video. And I do feel like there's some very special and specific resources in terms of drug exposed babies. So definitely I would encourage you to like look up and find resources based on that. I don't have too much experience with that personally. My son was born on drugs, but I didn't get him until he was 5 months old. So he'd already gone through the withdrawals and such like that. So just keep that in mind. Definitely educate yourself as much as possible. And like I said, just go into this with an open mind and be willing to spend that extra time to really bond and connect with the baby when you first get them, because once again, it's going to be important for you as a caregiver, but even more so for them, to minimize that trauma and to help them grow and become, the healthiest and happiest babies that they can be. All right, guys, so that's really all I have for you for this video. If you have a great bonding tip that I did not mention, definitely leave it in the link below or the comments below. That way other foster parents can use this as a resource. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe for more videos. I'll talk to y'all next time. Bye.